So the title of this workshop is Building an Appetite for Technology, Academic Writing in the 21st Century. And as Shrimi introduced, I am Anuj Gupta. I'm doing a PhD right now from the University of Arizona. I am originally an English literature student. Let me show you. I don't know if you can, let's play this game. Can you recognize where I am in this photo? Try and find me and type it out in the chat. You can say like third from the top right or center, third, whatever. You can type out something.
Oh, Harshit has been able to locate you.
Okay, what did
Bottom
you say?
left third.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, that's me. This is my English honors class from Hindu College. This is 2010, so 11 years ago. It makes me feel weird saying this out that it was actually 11 years ago. But yeah, so I am traditionally an English honors student. And then after, I also did a master's from Delhi University and then an MPhil in English from JNU. And then I started teaching at Ashoka University, where I wasn't teaching English literature, but this new course on academic writing, which was very exciting, which taught me a lot. Unlike in many DU classrooms, many other private universities are starting to have like full-fledged academic writing courses. Although I think DU might be starting something like that too. I'm not sure. Shrimi would be able to tell us about that better. But at Ashoka, I started to interact with a lot of students, a lot of colleagues from psychology, anthropology, and a whole bunch of disciplines, which really opened up my mind and taught me a lot of things. And that's what I'm also doing a PhD in right now. It's a very interdisciplinary field called rhetoric and composition, which basically studies the ways in which students learn how to do academic writing, and it tries to provide solutions through which that process can be improved. So it's like an intersection between education psychology and English. So it's like the perfect blend of both your disciplines. So what are we going to do in today's workshop? We're going to understand what academic writing is. We're going to ask ourselves why humans do it. And we're going to learn how technologies, softwares, websites, apps can help improve our experience of academic writing. Before we begin, a few small requests. Please try your best to be as comfortable, as honest, and as free as possible in this workshop. As I said, if possible, turn your video on. If you can't, that's fine. Please put your mics on mute. Otherwise, there's a lot of disturbance, but there will be lots of opportunities where I'll ask you to unmute or type in the chat. So you can do that. If you want to interrupt me at any point, if you want to ask a doubt, so this needs to be changed. I doubt there's a raise hand feature. I did this workshop in Zoom once earlier, that's why it's here. But just type in the chat or unmute yourself and speak, and Shrimi will help me know when somebody's asked a doubt or somebody has something to contribute. And this whole workshop is very practical. It will involve a lot of interaction from you, so it's not lecture based. So if you're thinking of, just signing off and going to sleep like most people do in lectures, please don't do that. It'll be nice if you participate, and we'll try and have a spirit of trial and error, like experimentation. We'll try something out. If it doesn't work, we'll try something else out. And most important, let's have lots of fun, because a lot of research in education psychology has shown that if there's a lot of fun that students have, which releases a chemical called dopamine, there's greater learning that happens. And some of the participants here from psychology would be able to tell us more about that perhaps. But keep all of this in mind. And so yeah, let's begin. I want to show you some data from the form that you all filled, where in the survey I asked you which of the following best describes your existing relationship with academic writing. And almost half of you said that you're getting the hang of it, but you seem to be warming up to it. So you're slowly kind of making your way towards it. A significant 36% also said you are struggling with it, and a solid 12% also say that you don't seem to understand it. So you're all in the same boat, just at different levels. So instead of only talking about the technologies, I want to begin by talking about what this thing called academic writing is and why people do it and where does it come from. So in the chat, could you all please quickly type your thoughts about this question? What all kinds of writing do you think count or qualify as academic writing? If someone were to say like, okay, this is a piece of academic writing, what all kinds of writing do you think would come in there? You just type in the chat, take a minute to do this. So I've stopped sharing to see what's happening in the chat. We have lots of interesting answers. We have research studies, pompous language. Thank you so much, Liam, for saying that. That's absolutely true. I used to hate the language that's used in academic writing. Still do. I have lots of problems in it. In fact, lots of my research in politics involves making academic writing more accessible to the wider public and not keeping it pompous or inaccessible or, just like this full of jargon that nobody can understand. So thank you for saying that. Research, essays, thesis, articles, one that is backed by existing studies, research, topical, critical writing. Okay, good. So you all have a good hang of it. Let me show you a range of answers here that I have found in my research. Sharing my screen again. So I think an easier way to understand would be to first think about academic writing, what you see on the left side. This is equal to research writing. It's any kind of writing that involves some kind of research done in an academic setting. And this can involve a whole range of genres of writing or kinds of writing. As you rightly said, it could be research papers, dissertations, essays, critical essays, assignments, literature reviews, but also abstracts and conference presentations. So for those of you who don't know, conferences are just basically like little parties for academics where they get together. I'm kidding, obviously, like little gatherings of academics where they get together and present their research through slides like this, through talks like this. So conferences happen. Grant applications is also an interesting academic genre. A grant, essentially, when you progress and become a slightly senior researcher, maybe at the master's level or although at the undergrad level also, you can apply for grants or funding. You can reach out to organizations. There are lots of organizations that fund research, and you can say, hey, here's a research project I have, and I think it's in line with your organization's goals. So why don't you give me some money and I will do my research? This whole tradition is slowly building up in India, but it's really popular in the US, in Europe, and in India also it's getting there. Lecture notes are also academic writing. There are certain genres of academic writing that we don't consider to be academic writing, but they are, like emails to teachers and to publishers. I know that the first time I had to write an email to a teacher at Hindu College, I was really scared because I didn't know what to do. And I actually wrote to them almost like mobile, abbreviations with the smiley and everything. And they sent me back an angry email saying you need to be formal. So I didn't know all of that. You learn all those things. Social media networking also happens in academic writing. Office hours, just where you meet your teachers, try to learn from them outside of the classroom. Then when you apply for jobs, interviews, job applications, group discussions, all this whole constellation, this whole ecology of writing qualifies as academic writing. Right? So now, what are we going to do with all of this knowledge? First, we're going to ask ourselves within academic writing then, what is research and why do we do it? We're going to look at the role of technology in that. And specifically, in this workshop, we'll use certain websites and apps to learn how to find and access sources. Yeah, there are different kinds of sources or papers or previous research that you need for your own work. So we'll figure out how we can use the power of technology to find that. And then we'll have question answers towards the end, but don't think that the Q&A is only reserved for the end. Keep asking stuff in between also. So first question, what is research and why do humans do it? Again, please type in the chat or unmute yourself and speak. What is research and why do humans do it? I'll type the question again in the chat.
Gopal has raised his hand. He would like to speak.
Perfect. Yeah, go ahead, Gopal.
So yeah, research is the one way to systematically gain knowledge that is accurate. So it is kind of, we can say it is the foundation of all sciences. And if I talk about psychology, we literally owe the title of science to research.
Excellent, Gopal. Thank you so much for sharing that. So Gopal says that research is the foundation of all disciplines, of all knowledge, and it's a systematic inquiry that leads to knowledge production. Excellent. Others? Harshita says to understand things and present a universally accepted point of view. Interesting. Shashav says to understand and organize knowledge. Sarthak says to move away from personal opinions and get some organized and objective knowledge, to add new ideas and insights to existing knowledge. Interesting. And you'll see that these ideas will also vary from discipline to discipline. While in some of the disciplines like psychology, which are closer to the pure sciences, there would be this idea of to move away from personal opinions and move towards objective and universal understanding. Whereas in other disciplines like anthropology or literature, it will be more closer to philosophy, and it will be all about how there is no the possibility of creating completely objective knowledge, and knowledge is subjective. So it's actually more about making your biases and your personal interventions visible and transparent in research. So we'll come across those differences also. But excellent. Okay, Harshit says to work towards a solution conclusion or categorically present an ideology. Interesting. Dhananjay says to add new ideas and insights to existing knowledge. Excellent. So let me show you my definition. All these answers are correct, and I will just share my screen again. Research is a unique human activity through which we find patterns in the world that help us see reality in a new light. And these patterns are useful for us and others around us. So just take a moment to read this. Research is a unique human activity through which we find patterns in the world. And you could also say we find patterns in the data in the world. And by finding these patterns, we are able to see reality in a new light and find solutions or create better uses for the things around us. There are thesis statements in all research papers, right? Like that one main idea that you're trying to put across. That's like if you were to summarize your paper in one sentence, that would be the thesis statement. If you don't know what it is, that's absolutely fine. But think of it as the main, like the soul of a research paper. That thesis statement is essentially a pattern where you, in psychological terms, you could say you try and connect two variables together, you find correlations or causations between them. In literature terms, you could say that you try and find an analysis of a text. You could do a character analysis of it. You could apply different theories to it. You could do a Marxist analysis of it, feminist analysis of it, so on and so forth. So it's essentially a pattern that you're finding in the world around you, in the data around you, and that finding of pattern leads to a new insight and leads to some use in the world. For example, you could think of books like B.R. Ambedkar's Castes in India, T.S. Eliot's Tradition, and the Individual Talent. And both of these are, of course, things that literature students might be more familiar with. Of course, psychology students could also be. Psychology students could think of Freud's theory of the unconscious, which even though many people have disproved it, but it's still a theory. So it's a way of looking at the world, which is new. You could think of other theories like, let's say, Maslow's theory, or all these kinds of theories that exist in psychology. All of these are new patterns, new ways of looking at data through which we find something useful in the world. Yeah. Any questions about this slide, about what research is? Please feel free to type in the chat. I'll wait for a few seconds. Shrimi, could you please read out the question?
We have Sarthak who would like to say something. Yes, Sarthak, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, I want to ask that if we are considering B.R. Ambedkar's caste in India and Eliot's tradition and this, or Freud's unconscious theories as something that is research, so how are we actually differentiating between a person's opinions from actually a research? Like if I create my own opinions about something, I write a very descriptive book about it or any just article about it, then how I will be differentiating between the two things?
Excellent. That's such a great question, Sarthak. Thank you so much for asking it. So what happens is that there is no single definition of research. Like if you meet these criteria, then it becomes research. What exists is that different academic disciplines, different academic formations, different institutions have different definitions of research, and it varies. So if you're looking at pure psychology or pure sciences, then it would have to be research that's not just a personal opinion, that is backed by experiments, that's backed by surveys, that follows certain methods. However, if you are looking at literature, I wouldn't say that literature research is just opinion. It's opinion that's backed by uh, rigorous analysis. And the analysis that happens in literature is that you take a text and then you do a close reading of it. You analyze the textual patterns within it, the kind of words used, the kind of metaphors used, and then you try and apply a theory to it, a Marxist theory, a feminist theory, a post-colonial theory. So that is how research is defined within literature. So I think I agree with you at one level where yes, research is not just the presentation of an opinion, but the presentation of an opinion which is backed by some kind of analysis and some kind of methodological inquiry. What that analysis or methodological inquiry is, that will vary from discipline to discipline, and it won't be the same across all of them. Does that kind of answer your question?
Yes, sir, it does. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And it would also vary based on the level that you are at, right? Like in at the undergrad level, you are doing something that is research, but if you do that level of research as a PhD student, that perhaps won't count as research, right? So the rigor keeps on increasing the higher you climb the academic ladder. There's one other thing I wanted to say about what you said. Personal opinion, yeah. So actually, even within psychology, have you guys covered something called cognitive biases? Could someone just type in the chat?
Yes, Sarthak has responded with a yes.
Okay, excellent. Sarthak, can you explain what cognitive biases are?
So cognitive biases are more often like our own perceptions biases, or it can be related to our interpretation of what's happening around us. So it usually varies from person to person, can often interrupt in our objective understanding of things.
Wonderful. So even in psychology, people recognize that it's extremely difficult to completely let go of all cognitive biases. So there are lots of critiques which say that what is presented as objective research is actually full of biases and is not really as objective as we think. I'll give you an example. A lot of the research that we read these days comes out of a very small sample size, that is the American white urban college going population, because most psychology research, at least globally, has happened within this small population, because that's the population that psychology research and the researchers in the US have access to. And based on that, they've made certain claims about human experience, about identity development and things like that. So there are lots of critiques even within psychology now, which is saying that because your sample size is so small, your research is actually biased and it's not as objective as you think that it is. So questions of objectivity and how to reach them are very interesting, and I'm glad you brought it up. And I wish there was more time to talk about it, but it's actually an area that I'm interested in. But maybe I'll share some links with you at the end of the chat to talk more about it. Let's go forward now. What are the processes that we follow to do research? So I hope you've understood what is research and why we do it. Now let's talk about the processes that we follow to do it. Broadly, there are 4 processes, and it's not like a single kind of linear journey. They keep crisscrossing with each other. But the first stage is always brainstorming. You develop ideas, you develop research questions, you ask big questions about the world, right? And these are often inspired from problems in your life. So has anybody already carried out some research, or are you familiar with this process? Could you share about a research question that you might have developed? And again, you can just type in the chat. Or you could share a research question from a research that you've read.
Gopal, yes, go ahead.
So right now in psychology, we are, in process of doing research as part of our course. So we have studied a lot of papers for it. So there's this one interesting part of psychology that we are looking into. So we are kind of exploring the relationship between the dark triad of personality and alexithymia. So yeah,
Dark color personality and?
dark triad of personality and alexithymia.
Could you explain what alexithymia is?
So alexithymia is not as such considered a disorder. It is a condition in which a person cannot explain or manipulate emotions. So they
Okay.
cannot feel emotions, and they're kind of confused with all of that. So it
Okay.
is negatively correlated with emotional intelligence.
Okay, great. So this is an example of a research question. Could somebody also give me an example of a research question from literature? And Shimi, feel free to jump in and you could also share
Yes,
your thoughts.
Sarthak.
Okay,
Yes,
Sarthak,
Sarthak,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
Yeah, so from literature point of view, I guess a feminist approach towards understanding mental illness in Pride and Prejudice.
Wow, excellent. So what would be the question there?
Sir, I guess it will be about how mental.
Sorry, I can't hear you.
Sarthak, I think you've muted yourself. Could you unmute and
Yeah,
proceed?
sorry, it was a bit technology error. So yeah, I was saying that the question might be that how Jane Austen actually tried to portray the mental health of women in the 20th century Pride and Prejudice she wrote.
Excellent. That's a great question. So both questions you look at it, they're asking basically a research question is a question about the world around you, about something that you're reading about, something you found in your data. And what it does is that it tries to connect two variables or two phenomena. Variable is essentially a concept or something that you're trying to study, right? So it could be a type of personality and a condition which prevents you from feeling lots of emotions that we just heard in the example about psychology. It could be a text that you're studying and a certain way of reading it, which is the second question that we just heard. So first step is developing questions like this that excite you, that lead you to insights that will help you in your life or will help society or will help you get a job. So the first step is always forming research questions. And this happens by engaging with the data, engaging with other people's research. You read other papers and you find things that interest you. This itself is a whole process. So, for example, right now, the research that I am carrying out, I am very interested in figuring out how we can increase engagement in online classes. So this is something that all of you present here would have experienced, that because of online classes, engagement has reduced because of distance, because of technology. Teachers and students both feel dissatisfied. That's a problem in the world. And I'm trying to understand how we can increase engagement in online classrooms. So my two variables are engagement and online classrooms, and I'm trying to understand their relationship. That could be a research question. So once you have a question, you move towards data collection, or you find data for it. And data collection is usually of two types. One is primary data collection, which is you actually finding real data about that thing. You go and collect data, and this varies from discipline to discipline. In psychology, it could involve experiments, it could involve field work. In literature, it could involve going to the archives or just reading your text. Like reading Pride and Prejudice would be primary data analysis. Then there's secondary data collection, where you read papers or research work written by other people on your topic. So in psychology, it would be looking up research papers written on emotions and dark personality. In literature, it would be reading up other critical essays on Pride and Prejudice, which I think is something that you do for your exams, right? So this is how you'd go about data collection.
Anuj, can I interrupt
Sorry.
you here?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, yeah. I think Harshita had something to say with regard
Yeah,
to
please
research
do.
question.
Please do.
Harshita, would you
So
like to?
uh, it was just a question
Yeah.
we got from our diaspora teacher. He
Yeah.
asked us to prepare a research on inequalities in diaspora. So
Mhm.
we are trying to get their perspective in terms of the inequalities in diaspora.
Okay.
Excellent. That's so great, Harshita. Have you thought about a question within that domain yet?
I did, but I didn't really get the reasons and inequalities clearly. So
Mhm.
I actually thought about it, and it's kind of the job opportunities and the inequalities they face in the workplaces and other cultural aspects where they are felt denied in
Yeah.
the society because of their
Mhm.
culture. So I just came across these 2 points for now.
Excellent. So once you have the points, step one is to try and isolate the variables within it. So from what I understand, you are looking at the field site is workplace, and you're trying to look at how does your you're looking at diaspora identity and you're looking at discrimination at the workplace, right? So you have these two variables, and now try to connect them using a question word. What are question words? What, how, why, when, right? And in research, usually the question is what and why. So try and connect these two words, including these two. Can you give it a try, Harshada?
Do we have you, Harshita?
Yes. Can you repeat the question, please?
Try and make a sentence which starts with the word what or why, and it also includes discrimination at the workplace as a phrase, and it also includes the phrase diasporic identity.
I think what leads them to go to a different country, unknown country to kind
Okay.
of grow,
Okay.
and how are they how they feel the inequalities there.
Excellent. Okay, so you have two good questions. These are things that you could pursue in your research. Nice. So yeah, great. So we have data collection, and then we have data analysis. Once you have your primary data, once you have your secondary data, then you go about analyzing it. And again, the methods of analysis would vary from discipline to discipline. You could do a close reading, which often happens in literature, where you sit down with your text and you read it line by line, word by word, and you try and find patterns in it. You could find things like, okay, what are the recurrent motives? What are the recurrent metaphors? What are the recurrent color patterns? Things like that that have been used in a poem or a novel or a text. You could also apply theories to primary text. You could, like, let's say you found a certain metaphor using which Jane Austen was representing mental health. Like, if I remember my English literature from BA correctly, what was not Jane Austen? What was that Bertha Mason novel? Shrimi, could you remind me, please? Jane Eyre. Yeah.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So in Jane Eyre, I don't know if you've read it, but there's a metaphor where there's one character. I want to say Bertha Mason, but I don't know exactly. But somebody who's locked up in an attic because she's quote unquote crazy or mentally
Yes.
unwell.
Bertha Mason.
Bertha Mason, right? Wow, I do remember it.
Mad
So,
Woman in the Attic.
Mad Woman in the Attic, right? So that's a metaphor that's used for presenting mental health in 18th, 19th century Victorian England. So you would close read the novel to find out what are the ways in which that metaphor has been represented, and then you would try and apply some theory to it, feminism or eco-criticism or whatever, to analyze what that metaphor means, right? And then you would synthesize analysis from these different data points to advance a claim, or you'll advance a thesis statement or your main idea that perhaps something like in 18th, 19th century, mental health was a taboo topic. It wasn't talked about a lot. So writers were using techniques like attics or dark spaces in their novels where they would hide mental health issues instead of openly representing it. So that's a pattern that you see in that novel. In psychology, on the other hand, how would it happen? You would perhaps do a survey or you'd do an experiment. You'd collect data on, let's say, how the metaphors used by college students at Aryabhatta to talk about mental health. Like, if your questionnaire asks them what are images or words that come to your mind when you think of mental health, they would give you some metaphors. You would collect that, and then after you have that data, you would analyze it using statistics, or also if you're doing qualitative analysis, you'd present like findings from your interviews and you'd share that, right? So instead of close reading, I mean, you would be doing statistical analysis if you were in psychology. So the methods keep on varying, but the broad categories, data collection, data analysis, is similar. And once you have all of this, then you finally communicate your findings. You write academic papers, you publish them in journals, you go to conferences. But thankfully now, we are also trying to make research more accessible through podcasts, through lectures, through TED Talks, through YouTube videos, all sorts of things to present your findings. So I know this is a lot to process. So take a second, I'll keep quiet, just read through the slide, and then once again, type all your questions in the chat. Oh, sorry. You want to see the slide? Yeah. I'll share my screen here. Entire screen. Yeah. So look at this slide and think about any questions you have about how this applies to your research. If you have any doubts about any of these steps, absolutely essential to clarify all your doubts.
Yes, Dhananjay, go ahead.
Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, you
Sir,
are.
could you please elaborate more on the primary and secondary data collection? So, for example, I'm writing, let's just suppose I'm writing a paper on, let's just say, the situations in Northeast and all those things, and I read a research paper from the government website of, Ministry of Women and Children. So, would it be considered the primary one or the secondary one?
Excellent. That's a great question, and it's often a confusing one. Let me give you a simple way to understand it. Do you understand what data is? Data is simply collecting different kinds of information from the world, right? It could be a literary text, it could be a newspaper article, it could be anything. So there are all these different kinds of data out there in the world. We collect different kinds of data and then try and find patterns in it to develop insights. Now, this data can be of two types. If it's data that you are producing yourself, like you are or you are collecting directly from the source, then it's primary data. Like, let's say you are analyzing primary documents like novels or poems, or you're collecting data from real life participants, like you're going and interviewing them, then it would be primary data. Secondary data would be data that you're not producing yourself, but you are collecting it from existing sources. So like in the example that you gave, if you're reading a research paper that somebody else has written, then that would be secondary data. However, if you go and interview people in the Northeast about problems that they're facing, then that interview data would be primary data. In literature, primary data would be the actual texts that you're analyzing, written by the novelists, written by poets, written by playwrights or other people. Secondary data would be reading research papers or critical essays written about those. Does that clarify your doubt? Please
Yes,
feel
I
free to
got
say
it.
if you're still confused.
No,
Okay.
got it, sir.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other doubts?
Gunjita has a question. Can you explain data analysis again?
Okay, Gunjita, can you tell me what discipline you're from?
Psychology.
Psychology.
Okay. Can you, are you doing a research project currently?
No, not right now.
Okay. So let's try and hypothetically think of a research project, and then I'll explain it through that. So let's say that we're trying to test out a technology. Let's say that we're trying to test out this phone, right? A new phone that Apple wants to launch, and it wants to see how user-friendly it is or not, right? So those are two variables, a new technology and its user-friendliness. So in the data collection phase, it will do experiments or surveys. It will find a bunch of people, it will give them the phone, and it will say you keep on using it, and then you fill a questionnaire which shows how user friendly it is for you. That survey will have different questions, and they'll mark, let's say, on a scale of 1 to 10 how user friendly it was. Some people will say 5, some people will say 3, some people will say 2. They'll answer other questions about what was user friendly, what was not user friendly. So it will generate a lot of data, and then in the data analysis stage, what you would do is various kinds of things. In psychology, I believe one of the popular methods is statistical analysis, where you use statistical formula and statistical softwares like something called SPSS or just MS Excel also, where you try and say, a simple thing would be descriptive statistics. Let's say you have 50 participants, and on a scale of 1 to 10, they answered how user friendly it is. Some people said 3, some people said 10. So you'd probably find the mean of it, and you say that in this new technology, on an average, people are rating its user friendliness to be 5.6 on a scale of 10. This is much better than the last technology we made, where people were rating it as 4.5. So on an average, the user friendliness of our device has increased. This would be quantitative or statistical data analysis in psychology. You could also be doing qualitative data analysis, where you would find all the sentences that they have written, like I did in the forms that you said, and you would find common words that people are using. Common words that people are using to describe user friendliness is that easy to use, or difficult to use or something like that. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I'm glad. Anybody else? We have time for one more question and then I'll move ahead. Okay, so we can come back to this later on also if others have questions, but you'll get lots of times. Don't worry. So, in the data that I collected from you, and I like my form that I sent you that you all filled, that was kind of like a research project also, right? I collected data from you. I found out that many of you are struggling with how to find sources and how to access them. You're struggling at the data collection stage, specifically with secondary data, how to find other people's research papers, how to download them, how to access them. So I decided to focus my workshop on that issue. I know many of you have various other issues also. Unfortunately, in one workshop, it's difficult to cover all of them. So we'll focus on this. But in the end, if you ask me your questions, I'll try and find other websites and links that can help you with other things also, right? So we'll focus on that. But before that, I want to ask you what technologies help us in all of these various processes. Over the ages, people have developed various kinds of technologies that help in the reading, writing, thinking, researching process, right? Right from charcoal and quill pens and pens to typewriters, computers, and now word processors. For reading also, we moved on from tablets to scrolls to books and now e-tablets. And this is an interesting picture I found for reading multiple sources at the same time. So like now how we have different tabs open on our desktops, on our computers. Earlier researchers used to use this kind of device where they would put one different book on each of these little platforms and they'd roll the wheel to read them simultaneously and access them easily. So when I looked at the survey data and the last question that you asked, how you do qualitative data analysis, this is one way. So I've put together like certain quotations from the form that you answered, and I've highlighted certain common patterns that I noticed, which told me that, okay, maybe how to find sources is a question that I can pursue. So many of you said that you would like to invent a software that takes all keywords of your paper, and instantly provides you with a list of papers that use the same set of keywords, or a website that would show relevant topics related to your study, an app or website which majorly focuses upon precise writing along with clear central idea, and a better research engine, a reliable website which would be a repository of almost all research articles for different fields, enabling keyword research, etc. So what research idea are you working on and how have you gone about finding sources related to it? This is the first question I want to ask you, and I'll stop sharing before I show you what are the steps to follow to find good sources. Could you type in the chat to tell me right now, what do you do? Let's say you have an assignment or a research paper you're working on. How do you go about finding research sources for it? How do you go about finding research papers or critical essays for studying for exams or writing papers?
Yes, Gopal, go ahead.
So our main source is scholar.google.com. So we just use that to, get some papers that are not ProQuest and not behind a paywall.
Mm-hmm.
So we kind of, struggle there.
Okay, excellent. Google Scholar, which I will show you in a bit, is a great database. Some people are saying JSTOR, ResearchGate. You go to academia.edu, which is also great. Sci-Hub, Google Scholar, PubMed, critical essays in the end of most books. That reminds me of all the worldview editions of the novels that I had, and there are all those critical essays at the end. Great. So you already have a range of resources. So the problems that you face is in finding good sources on these databases and finding good databases, and second, most importantly for students in India, is also how to access them, given that most of them are behind the paywall and you have to pay a lot of money. So let me try and share my screen again and give you some solutions for this issue.
We have more responses. Students have responded with Google Scholars, ResearchGate, JSTOR, and read the text. Go on either JSTOR and academia.edu,
Yeah.
Sci-Hub.
Great.
Yes, critical essays.
Excellent. So these are the 4 steps that you should really put to heart whenever you're trying to find sources. And I'm using the word source again and again, right? So what I mean by source is other people's research on your topic. That means secondary data collection. So what you have to do is first find which database is best for your research. And all these examples that you've given, they are databases. JSTOR is a database, academia.edu is a database, Google Scholar is a database. A database is simply a place which stores a lot of research papers. If you've never used any of them, that's also absolutely fine. Just keep noting the names that are coming up in the chat and just type them out on your browser and search through them. This is how we all learn. You start from scratch sometime, right? So your first step is figure out which database would be best for you. Different databases are good for different disciplines. And then learn how to search them using search Boolean algorithms. This is an interesting technical concept that I'll show you today, where if you learn this technique, you're able to mine those databases or find good sources through them easily. Once you have those sources, you need to determine which source has more quality, that is, which is more useful for your work. You need to learn how to download and archive them, and you need to learn how to read, cite, and annotate them. So there are good technological apps or websites that can help you at each of these stages. So just take a moment to process these 4 steps. And don't worry, we'll be taking a break very soon. Okay, let's proceed. So let's find out how the magic of searching works on the internet, and we'll take a break after this. This will tell you, actually, a lot of you use Google, right? How does searching really happen on Google? Have you ever thought about like what happens in the back end? There's a documentary that came out recently and it's freely available on YouTube. I will encourage you to watch it. I'm showing a clip from that documentary. It's about how Google's search engine works, what really happens behind the scene when you put a search item into Google. So let's watch this video. Shrimi, can you give me a heads up to confirm whether the video is visible? And I'll play it
Yes,
then.
it is visible.
Okay. Because it might be lagging for some people, let me also quickly drop the link in the chat in case you want to watch it on your desktops.
Yeah, so how does search work?
How search works?
How search works in a nutshell.
This is server rack 3349B. It lives here in Ballybane, Ireland, along with cows, a golf course, and Kavanaugh's Auto Accident Repair Center. This is one of the places where search happens. Search is a big piece of software that takes the words you type in here and looks for them here on the World Wide Web. It can do that because first, it downloads a copy of the entire web, scans it, and makes a list of all the words and lists of all the pages each word appears on.
So think about it. What Google actually does first is that it downloads, and every day it has to do this because the internet keeps on changing, right? It downloads a copy of each and every website and everything that's there. So imagine the amount of data that it has to first download, and then it creates an index of each of those words. Think of an index like a dictionary. So it takes, let's say, the word that dance they're saying, it will make a list of all the websites that have the word dance in it. Imagine the immense kind of process that is. Let's see what happens next.
It's like the index of a book, except 10 trillion times longer. Lasagna appears on 59 million of those pages. When you search for lasagna, the software puts these pages in order. with what it hopes are the most useful at the top and less useful at the bottom. Most people searching for lasagna want a recipe for lasagna.
Look at how delicious that looks.
Some people want nutrition facts for lasagna. And a few people want to learn about the life and research of Louis C. Lasagna, MD. They call him the father of modern pharmacology. The software living on server rack 3349B helps rank those pages, depending on where you live, whether the page was updated recently, how many other pages linked to that, how many times they...
So once it has a list of all the websites and it creates an index of how different words are present on each of those websites, the software goes about ranking them based on various parameters, like how many people have already seen that website, how likely it is to be seen, those kind of things, right? So first is download the websites, second is make an index, and then rank it.
Lasagna title page with other pictures of lasagna. It does all this in less than 1 second. Billions of times a day, every day. Mostly for things that are tougher to figure out than lasagna.
Right, so imagine the insane amounts of research and technological power that simple things like Google are using. Why I showed you this is to just to give you a behind the scenes experience of what happens when you type a research papers or some topic out either in Google or Google Scholar, anywhere. This is the back end of the technology that's happening. So you understand now that there's a certain pipeline or certain way in which the software uses software techniques to access that data. And if you know how to give a good search query, how to type your topic out in a certain way, it becomes easier for the software to find you the right kind of papers. And that is what I'll talk to you about in the next part of the workshop, where I'll teach you something called Boolean search algorithms, which can help you figure out what is a good way to type your topics in either Google Scholar or somewhere else, so that you can get the right kind of research papers. So we'll take a break at this point and we'll come back and we'll pick it up from here. Okay, so what are the databases which are useful for you? Many of you have already typed in the chat. I want to share some more with you. JSTOR and Google Scholar you already know. Connected Papers is a beautiful app that I'm going to show you today. But other databases, Shodhganga is a very important one that I don't know if you're familiar about. It's one of the really rare and amazing things that the Indian government has done for research, where it has compiled all the dissertations that have been written by students, PhD students in India, and it's a repository of that. So if you're working on things related to India, it's a great resource, right? Shodhganga.inflibinet.ac.in. You'll find all dissertations written by Indian PhD students there. And lots of others you've typed in the chat. PubMed, academia.edu can be great. There are lots of these. So I want you to take a moment to just make a list of this and keep it somewhere, right? Let me stop sharing. Let me type these links in the chat. And I want you to keep them safe somewhere. And all the others that have been already typed in the chat, keep them safe somewhere else. You'll have recordings later on, but it's good to just have these links with you. Yeah. Google Scholar, JSTOR, Connected Paper, Shodhganga, academia.edu. What else? PubMed, somebody said. PubMed could be done. ResearchGate is another one. You Google all of these. Yeah, could you type out LibGen also in the chat so that students have access to the spelling? And what was I about to say? Yeah, so I was saying that right now, I know it's unfortunate that your college does not have an e-library or an online library. I'm sure they will be working on it to have it ready for you at some time in the future. But if you decide to go into research, if you go into a master's program, if you go to other universities, often they will have a library website which will be a database of its own, where it will collect high quality sources from all these databases and make it accessible to you. And it will also download them for you. this is something that I didn't experience when I was in DU, but when I went to JNU for my MPhil, I found out that JNU has a e-library where I could simply type in my topics on the library website and I'd get all those resources. I could download them. That is also what I'm experiencing here in the US. So these are inequalities that we unfortunately have to deal with. In DU, I also didn't have access to those resources, but I'm guessing some colleges are starting that now, and slowly you'll be able to do that. But there are workarounds. There are other resources that you can use to find them. But as if you decide to go further in your research journey, is what I'm saying, you'll get access to better library resources online, which will get you all these databases. Okay, so you've made a list of these. Now let me share my screen again. What you need to do is share screen. Yeah, so step one is identifying which database is good for you. And this comes from Hit and Trial. You have a list of them now. Next is figuring out how to search these databases. So right now, what most of us do is that we just do random searching. We just keep typing words that come to our mind for our topic. And often we are frustrated that we're not finding the right things. But what we need to do is to build a search strategy, almost like a chess game, like strategize about how to build a search strategy. And that happens using a technique called Boolean search operators, which are words like and, or, and the minus sign. The first three are more important. These are not so important. The first three, and, or, and minus sign, which, as I was talking to you about earlier, it tells the search software more specific details about what you are looking for. And I want to teach you how to use these properly. So let's watch a video which will explain how to use them. And again, I'll type the link of the video in the chat so that you have easy access to the video in case it's not visible on your screen. You can watch it yourself, but I'm going to play it now.
Yes,
okay, thank you.
For much of your academic work, you will be required to use library databases. These databases work a little differently from search engines like Google, so this video will cover some strategies for using library databases effectively.
Whatever they're telling us about library databases, they will work equally well on Google Scholar, on Google and JSTOR, everywhere, all the databases that I've shared.
These days, we are all pretty good at searching the internet, and we can use Google to find just about anything. Reviews of our favorite TV shows, the latest weather report, or biographical information about a famous person, all in just minutes. We know how to do this because it's so easy. Put in a few keywords, and in seconds, we have exactly what we need. But being a good Google user doesn't mean you can easily search the resources needed for your academic work. Resources like databases and library search tools. And if your instructor says you need scholarly sources, Google's not going to help you much. That's because library databases work differently than search engines like Google. Using a database means you're going to have to spend some time thinking about how and what you're going to search. That's your search strategy, and coming up with one can save you a lot of time and effort. One study found that students with a good search strategy spent 50% less time searching for sources than students who just put in a few random words. Students that use a search strategy think about the words they're going to use and the words they aren't going to use and how they're going to put them together. Let's say you've decided to write a paper on this question: how does being bilingual affect children's brains? You can take the path of least resistance and copy and paste the question itself into a library database.
This is what we usually do, right? We come up with a research topic or question and we type the whole thing into Google or Google Scholar or JSTOR. But this video is telling us that that's not the right way to go about it. So let's see what the right way is.
But that will most likely give you poor results. Or you could take a few minutes and come up with a search strategy. Let's give it a try. First, we want to pick out only those words that are directly related to our research question and eliminate the ones that are not going to help us much. How, does, and being are not words specific to our research question, so we're not going to use them. What about affect? It could help, but it could also appear in a lot of information not directly related to our question. So let's eliminate it for now.
So what do you think is happening here? They're basically removing all the words except the nouns in your research question, right? nouns and adjectives, bilingual, children's, brains. So in the topics that we were looking at earlier, you'd want to retain Jane Eyre, mental health, metaphors, or there was one psychology topic I forget, but dark personality triad and one emotional condition. I forgot the name of the condition, but those would be your two variables or two nouns in your question that you retain. Now, what do you do next?
That leaves us with 3 great keywords: bilingual, children, and brain. Now we're ready to put those words together. Unlike Google, which places an invisible "and" between all your keywords, in many library databases you must add the word "and" between your keywords. So we need to change bilingual, children, brain to bilingual and children and brain.
What adding the word "and" does in between this is that, remember how we looked at the video in Google which told us that if you use the word dance, it searches all the downloaded copies it has of websites and sees where the word dance is. When you add the word "and," it says that search only for those websites or those papers which have both these words, which has bilingual and children. And we add another "and" here, so brain. So it will not give us results for papers that have only bilingual or only children. It will give us results for papers which have all these 3 words together, right? That's what the Boolean search operator or computer coding word "and" tells the search software.
So we're done, right? Not so fast. Library databases also use another important word to combine key terms, and that word is the magical "or." "Or" can add so much to your search. As you know, there are many different terms you can use for the same idea or concept. You can use "or" to include those other words, words like synonyms, related words, and examples. So for the word children, we could also use the words child, kid, and childhood. And for brain, we could also use a related word like cognitive. Now we need to put these together with our other words. Library databases do this with the use of "or" and parentheses.
So I've told you what the Boolean search operator "and" does. Let's talk about what the other operator "or" does. While "and" makes sure that both the words are present in the website, the "or" one says that even if one is present, show us that. So it will search for websites that have children as well as childhood. So this helps when we don't know the exact word for what we are searching, and this often happens, right? So you can put a series of words. So when you combine "and" "or" together, what is happening is that first the search software will say, okay, I need to find websites or papers which have bilingual, which have this one of the words in this thing and one of the words within brain or cognitive, right? It might seem a little complicated, but keep watching the video and I'll show you lots of examples. Then it will become clear what happens when we're combining the words.
Anytime you use an "or," you want to make sure you nest the related words in parentheses. In this example, you are telling the database to look for resources that include the word bilingual and the word children or childhood, plus the word brain or cognitive. This will produce results like this one that definitely include the word bilingual and either the word children or childhood and either brain or cognitive. There really is no limit to how many words you can use. For example, bilingual and children or childhood and brain or cognitive or memory or learning. So next time you need to use a library database, save yourself time, effort, and frustration by following these steps. Enter only those words that are directly related to concepts in your research question. Eliminate words that are not relevant. Come up with synonyms and other words related to your keywords. Put them together with "ands" and "ors." This will give you results that are much more relevant than if you just pasted the question into the search box.
Okay. So now I want to show you an example of how to use this, and then things will start to become clear. So let's imagine that we want to do research on caste system in the Indian education system, right? So, and we want to specifically find out caste system in the medical field, right? Does that topic make sense? Let's say that we now go to Google Scholar. Yeah. So our topic is caste system in the Indian medical field, okay, in Indian medical education. So we would say caste system and Indian education. Let's try that first. So it will give us education and caste in India, consequences of American caste system. So right now you see it is giving us some sources, but it's also mixed. Like America has come into the picture, even though we don't want results on that. Generally, Indian society has come up, history has come up. We want specifically on Indian medical education. So what do we do there? We say caste system and Indian education, and we add another and we say medical. Let's see what happens there. Medicine, chiropractic, and caste and economic discrimination, caste and health in Indian scenario. So we're still getting some results, but they're not exactly what we're looking for, because we want papers that will specifically talk about how caste system impacts education in the medical field in India, right? So let's try and fine tune it even more. Let's say, let's remove system. Let's just say caste and education, and here I think we need to use few synonyms for medical. So it could be medicine or doctor or let's leave it at doctor, and we're looking at India. Yeah, see, now we found a perfect resource. Medicine, merit, money, and caste, the complexity of medical education in India. This is the kind of topic I was looking for. And using these Boolean search operators allows me to find specifically what I was looking for. So let me click on this to see if it's available. It is leading me to a website, ResearchGate, which somebody had written in the chat. And on ResearchGate, the papers are already available, so I can easily download this. Yeah, so I will stop sharing my screen now and come back to you all and ask you your doubts about using the operators and or to fine-tune your research strings. It's complicated. I would be surprised if all of you have already gotten it. So I don't expect you to get it, but I expect you to get some sense of it. So please ask me your doubts about what I've just explained. You can type in the chat, you can unmute yourself and speak.
So I just had a little doubt about this. Does the order of the words, affect our search?
That's a great question. And I will be honest and tell you that I actually don't know. My hunch is that the order is followed left to right. But I think the order shouldn't matter so much, because it's looking at the whole research paper and it's finding all the keywords there. So even if you type India first and then caste and then system, it will still find papers depending on whether and exists between them or not. So and means that all these words need to be there. The order should not matter. But that's actually a good question that I would ask somebody who works in the library at my university and find out. Great question, Gopal. But no, I don't think the order will matter. Okay. I think so, because if you don't capitalize it, it might assume that it's part of the search string. Like it might assume that it's just a word like caste system.
Okay.
Right? So you capitalize it, you say that it's being used not as a word, but as a Boolean search operator.
Okay.
And Dhananjay says that he read the Boolean thing in physics and computer science in class 12. Yes, exactly. It's actually the core basis of computer coding. Boolean logic is at the heart of a lot of coding that happens in computer science. So those of you who've done coding or want to do coding, it'll be useful if you go in depth into it. So let me show how to use the minus sign on this reminder. Share my screen again. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So we had this search string that we just used. Let's remove India and let's see what comes up. Now you see that China is also coming up, and earlier we had America also. So let's say we want to use the minus sign to show that we want India and we don't want any other country to come in. So we'd say minus China, minus America. These two countries won't show up in the result. So let's try it out and see. It's all hit and trial. Yeah, so you see the China paper has gone. So it won't come here. So the minus sign, it helps us fine tune things even further, where what it tells us is that don't include words like this. Like if you find a website that has these words, great, but then also make sure that it doesn't have these words. So it helps you like tell the search engine about what kind of research you're looking. So let's say you're searching for metaphors, right? Metaphors and psychology. It will give you research that's happening in psychology with metaphors. It will also give you research that's happening in fiction. So that's literature, right? Let's say you don't want literature, you just want psychology. So you could say minus fiction, minus literature. Now those things won't come up here. Let's say you want to do the reverse thing. You want to do metaphors and literature minus psychology. Oh, oops, spelling mistake. Yeah. So now you'll get research on metaphors only done by literature scholars and not from the psychology perspective. This is actually a good example of why the minus can help. Some concepts like metaphors are prevalent across disciplines, and if you want to look for research only in a specific discipline, then you can remove literature from certain disciplines like this. Yeah. Okay. So
yes, Sarthak. Sarthak has a question. Go ahead.
So the way this minus sign works, does the plus sign also works in the same way? Like if I have anything specific, like India and America, I want to find correlation studies between the two countries. So does that work as well?
So, and the operator that I said, that's actually the plus sign. It's doing the work of what a plus sign means. It's connecting those two things together. It's saying find stuff for both these things, India and America. And minus is saying find India, but not America.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Other questions? So what I want you to do now is to try this out yourself. Open Google Scholar on your computer screens. I'll wait for a minute till all of you have it open. Now I want you to try this out, but try to create a search string using and, or, and minus sign related to any topic that you're interested in. Maybe I can give you a simple example. Try and find sources for mental health from India and not America. Mental health and students. Yeah, I've given you a sample problem. You can try this out. Try to find research papers on Google Scholar that are about mental health of students, but from India and not from America. Okay, could someone type in the chat, what is the search whole sentence that you've used?
So, sir, if we increase the number of keywords and just put and in between, so
Yeah.
the results would decrease, right? That seems
Yes,
to be the case.
exactly. Yeah, it will
Yeah.
decrease and it will like become more and more focused for the things that you are looking at. So Shashav has given mental health and India and students or children minus America. Excellent. You guys are really getting it. Harshit says VAW and Northeast India, fiction or literature or poetry minus Iran. Great. And your search strings are diaspora or migrants and inequity or discrimination minus America. Great. Crossbreeding plants minus India. Great. So you guys are getting the hang of it. This is exactly what you need to do to find the kind of sources you're looking at. And it doesn't happen in one day, right? I'm still learning. I learned it last year, that late in my research journey. Nobody taught me, but I'm still learning and trying to perfect it. This will allow you to find more specific resources, and this strategy will work not just on Google Scholar, but also on JSTOR, on Google, on PubMed, on academia.edu, everywhere, right? So keep the strategy in mind. Now I want to show you what is a real gold mine, a website that very few people know about, and I'm glad I get to share this with you, called connectedpapers.com. So let me share my screen again. So this is connectedpapers.com, and let me start from scratch here. And this is again freely available. So here, let's say I want to type a topic again, and we were earlier talking about Jane Eyre, the novel. It's a novel that literature students study. So Jane Eyre, and we were talking about mental health, right? So I'd use the same strategy, Jane Eyre and mental health. This stand I'm using right now, nothing else. So what this does is it will give me various research papers that have been written on that topic. So I will search through them. And I will try to find something that has a lot of citations. Let me try and look at this. Reader, I detained him under the Mental Health Act, a literary response to Professor Fennell's best interests and treatment for mental disorder. So interesting thing to note is that these keywords are looked at not just the title, but the body of the paper itself. The body must have had the word Jane Eyre, which is why it has come up. So I click on this. And what this website does beautifully is that it builds a graph. Now, what does this graph show me? Does anybody want to take a guess?
So maybe it takes us to all the points where the keywords are being used and connect them to make some sense, or
That's a
Or
really good guess, but unfortunately that's
or
not.
maybe all of the papers that have cited it.
Yes, exactly. So oftentimes what happens is that we don't know the larger network of people who are citing a certain kind of research, as well as the network of the people that that paper has cited. So this website creates this graph for you. This paper was written in 2008, right? So here what you'll see, all the papers that are before 2008 are the papers that must have been cited in this paper, and everything that's after 2008 is research that has cited this paper. So this is the paper, right? Gurham 2008 is the paper we are looking at. Everything that comes before it are citations that are present within this paper. And these are the three people who cited this afterward. So you click on any of them, you'll get the title of that paper. And sometimes you'll also get a abstract of that paper. So you can read it and see whether it's useful for you. And you can also open it in Google Scholar. Simultaneously, you can also look at all the papers that were quoted by Gurnham. You can browse through them like this and see which ones might be relevant for your research by reading the abstract, by opening them in Google Scholar. So what that does is that instead of you having to find new papers each time, you just find one good paper that is connected to your research, and you get like almost 10, 20 other papers that are connected to that. So it like really speeds up the literature review process. And this website is new, so it's not as good as Google Scholar. There are still, its database is less, but it's really amazing what it can do. And as before, I want you to try it out yourself. Go to this website called connectedpapers.com and type in topics you're interested in, find a paper that is in line with that, or find a paper that you've already read from your research and try to build a graph like this for that and try to search using it.
So see, for example, I searched the words caste and rape because my work is based around that.
Right.
So I can locate that this is the paper that I was that I had selected right here.
Yeah.
Linda, right?
Right.
These are the citations probably connected to Linda's paper.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do I make sense of the ones that are present around here? Because you had a very clear sort of a before and after pattern.
It's a really interesting graph. Can you click on one of the outliers, one of the dots on the outside?
Here? Okay. Let me try this one.
Something that's not connected at all.
Okay, that's not. Maybe this. Oh, it's connect. I think they all are somehow or the other connected, right? That's how they are. No, not this
Now I see it. Now I see it. So what's probably happening is that the core paper that you found, it has a certain one level web of citations, which is papers that have cited it or that it has cited. The outer layer might be citations connected to those secondary papers. So let's say you have paper A, which is cited paper B. Paper B has also cited other papers, so those outliers might be connected to this.
Right.
So it's indirectly connected to the paper you found, but not directly connected.
Right. I think typing in better keywords would help narrow it down further. And actually, this is very broad.
Yeah, what helps is that if you go to Google Scholar, you find your paper there. And once you found a paper that's good for you, you type the title of that exact paper in Connected Papers and find this web like that.
Okay, right. Okay, that's very interesting, actually. Thank you.
Yeah. Of course. So others in the class, have you tried? What does it look like? Anybody want to share?
I came across to a very complicated graph. I searched for a Chipko movement in Uttarakhand, and it was really complicated. I didn't really understood it at first.
Can you share your screen so we can see your graph?
Right now, I haven't opened the Google screen. Wait a minute. How do we share screen?
At the bottom, you will see there are many buttons, bottom center. It is the
Have you
fifth
logged
button,
in through your phone? Okay, right.
Yeah.
So
we can. Now, can you open Connected Papers?
So.
There's an extra T in Connected. Yeah, okay. Great. So the first thing you want to do is to locate your own paper. So your paper says Sharma is the first name of the author and the year is 1987, right? So that is what you want to look for first. Where is Sharma 1987 on the graph? Can you find that? I think it's there towards the center. The circle which is highlighted in black, I think that might be it. So intuitively, what you can say is that all the dots that are near that paper, that will be closely.
Am I still sharing?
Let me find.
I'm sorry, I lost connection.
No worries. Let me share my screen, and I will find Chipko movement on connected papers and show it to everyone? I think that will be easy.
Yes, I think that will be easier.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's say we have Chipko movement and Uttarakhand. Sharma 1987, this is the paper that you were looking for. Right. So we have Sharma 1987 here. So instinctively, first thing that I want to do is to check out all the papers that are right next to it. Because this is like the distance between that paper and the others determines what the software believes to be closeness to it. So let's look at Murray 1991. We don't have much for it, so we'll bypass it. Women and farm work in Tamil folk songs. Okay, this is also not directly connected. Time allocation and fuel usage in 3 villages of Garhwal, Himalaya. So this might be somewhat related. Rural employment, wages and labor as a survey. This could be related. So it's all about just clicking on each node, starting with the ones closest to it, and slowly like sifting through the titles, sifting through the abstracts to figure out which one might be of use to you. Gender, environment, and livelihood security, an alternate viewpoint from India. This could be useful. And now let's go here. Ecofeminism and geography, the case of Vandana Shiva and Chipko. So this is definitely going to be useful. Community-based water supplies in Indonesia. This is definitely not connected to our topic at all. Is there a Chipko Andolan, T. Weber? So whenever you find it, read its abstract and then go to Google Scholar. And you'll find that resource in Google Scholar. And then you will see, do I have access to it? So it is on JSTOR. Now, obviously, JSTOR is not something that is freely accessible to everyone, right? So what do you do when you come across a paper like this? That brings me to the next part of the workshop. I'm going to move towards that now. Yeah, so what do you do when you come across a paper that you haven't found? Sarthak has a question. This question is not exactly related to search methodology. When I'm unable to find any study related to what I wish to research on, what approach should I take in such cases? Sarthak, in that case, what you need to do is refine your keywords or change your keywords. Often the words that we are using, maybe those specific words don't exist in the research. So we need to change words. For example, like we might be using the word brain, but there's no paper with the word brain. We have to use the word cognitive then. So you find synonyms, find different words for what you're searching for, and then you might be able to find something. Yeah, so my question is, let's say you found a paper. What do you do to download it? Gopal, go ahead.
Okay, yes.
My question is that just in case, in a very hypothetical situation, I find a research question in which like there are no research papers in that subject or topic.
Excellent.
So what do I do then?
In that case, you congratulate yourself because you're a pioneer. There is nobody in the field who has done that research, and you have the freedom to then begin doing that research. And what you do then is that if that topic hasn't been worked on, you find other topics which are similar to it. So I'll give you an example. Academic writing teaching in India is not something that has a lot of research. There's not much research that has been done. There is a lot of research that has been done on academic writing teaching in America, in Latin America, in other spaces. So what I would do is that I would find that analogous research, see how they're doing it, and use that as inspiration for my research, even if there's no research papers about the specific topic of academic writing teaching in India that I'm interested in. Does that make sense?
Oh. Yes, sir.
Tanvi asks, do we have any particular database related to experiments and not the theories related to it? That's an interesting question. I think it's difficult to separate experiments from the larger research paper and the theory. So you'll have to just like download those papers and focus only on the method section where you'll get details about the experiments per se. But yes, now since we are low on time, I want to quickly cover the final bit. How do you download the papers if you don't have access to it? So could someone share your experiences? What do you do with papers that you don't have access, when you don't have money to download them? I want to share like one resource with you, but I also want to get an honest sense of how you already go about doing it. So this is where I want to briefly discuss the copyleft movement. what the copyleft movement does, you must have heard the word copyright, right? So a lot of the big journals in the world, big publishers, what they do is that they copyright the research that comes out, and they make university libraries pay for their students to have access to it. Many universities, like the university that I'm at right now, has a lot of funding, so it's able to buy those memberships and allow those students to have access. Even universities like JNU are able to buy those, so students can download those for free. There are many scholars, though, who are working in colleges who do not have enough funding to buy those kind of memberships. So a lot of scholars in such spaces have banded together to create something called the copyleft movement, where they argue that knowledge should be freely accessible to everyone and you shouldn't have to pay for it. That is how knowledge will evolve. Otherwise, only rich people will have access to these resources. So what they've created is that they've created certain websites like Sci-Hub, what some people are typing in the chat. There are others like something called LibGen. There's something called bookzzz.org. Now, before you use them, I want you to be aware of the ethical dilemma in accessing these resources. So you have the copyright movement, which on the one side says if you access these resources, it's illegal. It's like buying something that's pirated, right? It's like buying a pirated version of a movie. So it's technically illegal. And although these laws are not as stringently followed in India, but you could still, theoretically, you could still get in trouble for using these websites, just like you could get in trouble for buying a pirated version of a film, right? That is one side of the ethical dilemma. The other side from the copyleft movement says that no, you should access them because knowledge should be freely accessible and available to all. So you as a scholar have to decide whether you want to use these resources to help your research or not, and the decision is yours. We can only direct you to the resources, and it's your decision finally whether you want to use them or not. What I want to show you is one middle ground where you don't use these kind of resources, but you still find access to them. So what I want to do is to introduce you to a Facebook group where people find sources for you. Where is the link? This has been a really amazing find for me. You can simply go and become a member of this group. What this group does is that you can post, let's say you found a paper on Google Scholar that you really want to learn from. That paper is not freely available to you. You can put in a request on this Facebook group and say, I really want to read this paper for my research. I can't find it. So this group basically consists of lots of people who have access to those journals or memberships. They've either bought it themselves or they're part of universities like JNU, like my university here, who gives them kind of access to those resources. So to help out young budding researchers, they will download it from their servers because they have access to it, and they will share it with you with the condition that you use it only for your purposes and you don't like publicize it or you don't like pass it off in very widely publicly accessible spaces. So this group is something that has been really helpful to lots of researchers across the world. You should also make use of it. Yeah, so that's pretty much how you can make use a lot of workarounds, which will make sure that even though your college does not have any library yet, does not have enough resources to get you all these expensive memberships, you could still access good research. And you know, oftentimes what happens is that if you just type the title of the paper that you're looking for and you type PDF next to it on Google, oftentimes you get papers like that which weren't accessible earlier because people have downloaded their versions. This won't work for everyone, but for many papers it could work. So it's all about figuring out like these strategies and these things. It takes time. What I'm telling you is a condensation of what I've learned over the last 10 years, right? And now it is your duty to make sure that you use this knowledge and like exponentially increase it so that when you teach other scholars who are joining the field a few years down the line, you're able to give them even more knowledge. And this is how knowledge incrementally gets built up by all of us contributing and helping each other out. So I see that I've already overshot time. We only have 4 minutes, so I'll stop my slides. It's okay. There's lots of stuff, but I don't want to cover it. I've already done a lot. These 4 minutes, I just want to leave for you. If you have any questions, if you have any suggestions, any thoughts, just feel free to share. Sorry, Tanvi, I know some people don't want to join Facebook, and I completely respect that. But unfortunately, I don't know any other social media versions of this page. So what you could do is find a friend who is there on Facebook and request them to post your requests on this page on your behalf. That's the only thing I can think of. Sorry. And this page is all voluntary run, right? It's nobody's getting paid for it, so it's all being done on a volunteer basis. So it's difficult for them to also like start other social media platforms because they don't have enough time. They're all researchers like us. They're students. Yeah. What can help, Tanvi, is that if you know teachers who have access to these resources in your college, like if you know teachers who might be in JNU or who might be in other universities who have access, they could download it for you. I know how I did that when I was in Hindu college, when I was doing my bachelor's. I would send the links to my teachers and request them if they could download it for me, so they could also sometimes find the papers. And to be honest,
Okay.
you don't necessarily need to find only papers behind those paywalls. There are many papers which are openly accessible, which are also good. At your level, you can still use them. It's not necessary that you only need those papers which are behind paywalls. Okay, other questions? Feel free to type in the chat. Is there something that I haven't covered, which I could have? You can also type that. So what I'll do is I want to drop a couple of resources in the chat. There are many things that obviously I couldn't cover, especially those related specifically to writing. I covered more the research side of things, but there are more things that you want to learn about writing, sentence structure, vocabulary, formatting, structuring in your paper, those kind of things. So I want to drop in 2 resources that will help you for that. Okay, Harshada asks, is there any site to translate things? Recently, I've been looking for a text in Malayalam and I didn't really find any English sources. That's again a good question, but I haven't worked with translation. I can only think of Google Translate, which I know is not very good, but it's still a good place, decent place to start. Google Translate, but I'm sure if you're working on translation, you might already know about that. But if you don't, you can try it out. Then I want to introduce you to this YouTube channel, which is run by the Writing Center at a university called Kriya University, which is a new university that's opened up in Chennai. And this YouTube channel has a lot of wonderful lectures on the writing side of things. They're freely available, accessible. If you want to improve your academic writing, definitely go through some of these lectures here. And I think you'll learn a lot from them. I know I learned a lot from these. The other website related to academic writing, all kind of queries that I want to share and that has helped me a lot, is something called OWL Purdue Writing Lab, which will answer all your questions related to MLA style, APA style, how to make citations, how to create bibliography, how to structure your paper, format your paper. This website will really help with that. So please save these also. So Connected Papers, Google Scholar, Kriya University Writing Center YouTube channel, and OWL Purdue website. If there's anything that you take away from these workshops, make sure these 4 sources you kind of save and keep with you.